get you a quick US market check and see the handover that we're getting from the Wall Street. Well, all three major averages came off their first losing week in three on Friday. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq Composite shed about 0.5% and 0.3% respectively. The Dow Jones Industrial Average, on the other hand, slipped 0.2% last week. However, the US stock futures jumped Sunday night after the Trump administration announced a trade deal with China. Following negotiations over the weekend in Switzerland, the Dow Jones Industrial Average rallied the futures of Dow Jones Industrial Average rallied about 408 points, or about 1%. The S&P 500 and Nasdaq futures also climbed more than 1%. Now, these moves come as without providing specific. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said that 2 days of trade talks with Chinese government officials in Geneva were productive and yielded a great deal of productivity. And the Bessent said that details would be provided in a briefing on Monday morning. Now, apart from that, investors this week will also look out for signs on how the rising trade tensions are impacting the U.S. economy. The Consumer Price Index reading for April is due Tuesday morning, while retail sales and the Producer Price Index, another inflation measure that is, are set for release on Thursday.
Oil prices rose on Friday, posting a weekly gain as trade tensions between top oil consumers, China and United States, show sign of easing, and Britain announced a breakthrough. Brent crude rose 1.7% to nearly $64 a barrel. US West Texas Intermediate crude gained 1.85% at $61 on the week. Both contracts were up more than 4%. Remember, these moves were before US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent met Chinese top economic official in Switzerland on May 10 to work towards resolving trade disputes that have threatened oil demand. Details of the meeting are expected later in the day. Separately, US President Donald Trump and British Prime Minister Starmer announced that Britain had agreed to lower tariffs on US imports. Meanwhile, tighter US sanctions on Iran could restrict supply and push prices higher. The US last week imposed sanctions on third small Chinese refinery for buying Iranian oil. Meanwhile, gold rose over 1% on Friday and dollar ticked lower. While the market digested comments of tariffs on ahead of a weekend meeting between US and China, spot gold was up more than 1% at $3,340 an ounce, gained more than 3% last week. US gold futures settled 1.1% higher at $3,344. The US dollar edged 0.3% lower, making bullion less expensive for other currency holders. The gain in gold came in at a time when President Trump had said that 80% tariffs on Chinese goods seems right, as representatives were then preparing for weekend talks to contain trade war between US and China.
Alright, then steady moves coming in as far as gold and oil are concerned. But Asia Pacific markets are also trading mostly higher this morning due to the optimism that US-China trade tensions could de-escalate following the superpowers talks in Switzerland over the weekend. Now, both countries alluded to a positive conclusion of the high-stakes trade talks, with US officials touting a deal to reduce its trade deficit, while Chinese leaders said they have arrived at an important consensus. Now, on the back of this, Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 was up 0.2% this morning. Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index is up 0.7%. China's Shanghai is nearly up 0.3%, whereas Australia's S&P ASX 200 is trading about 0.4% higher. Now, remember, back home, Nifty ended the day, that is Friday, about 1% lower at around 24,008 levels. But as of now, the implied Nifty suggests that we're headed for a gap-up opening above the 24,500 levels. That's an uptick of almost 2%. Now, let's see how that pans out, given the market will not only react to the US-China trade deal, those developments, but also the ongoing tensions between India and Pakistan.
Definitely, Kanishka, it's a cease.
If you like this video, then like, share and subscribe to ET Now.